All right. Well, welcome in everybody. Thank you for joining us on what is a busy time of year. My name is Lyndi Liersemann. I'm a director of partnerships here at Mercy Corps on the high impact philanthropy team. Welcome to all of you. Many of you on this call are longtime supporters of our work. Thank you. We do have a few guests joining us, so welcome. And I will give a very brief overview of Mercy Corps, just so that everybody knows and has a little bit more context into the photos that you'll see in a moment. Mercy Corps is a global organization of 6,000 humanitarians working around the world side by side with people living in poverty and disaster and conflict, certainly living through the effects of climate change. And we are committed to building trust with these local communities. And part of the way that we do that is because approximately 90% of our staff are from the local communities in which we work. So that's a really important aspect of using local knowledge and also building the trust and moving forward together as a community. And we say that we work with communities, but really we mean that we work with the most marginalized within them. So that means bringing to the table women, youth, people living with disabilities, ethnic minorities. We want everybody to come to the table and participate in creating comprehensive solutions so that problems are addressed from all angles, and we have a much better chance of having a sustainable solution. And we say that we work towards four primary outcomes at Mercy Corps. The first is food security, which is not only do people need enough food to eat, they need nutritious food to eat. The second is water security. That one's pretty clear. People need access to clean, safe water. The third is economic opportunity, and this one is really important. That marginalized community that we just spoke about, they need to be able to participate in the local markets. They need to be able to sell their wares, access services, so that everybody can move off of aid reliance and towards self-reliance. And then finally, the fourth outcome that we work towards is peacekeeping and good governance. This one seems really obvious, but it's actually often overlooked in international development. We want community members to have the tools and the resources to resolve their own conflicts before it escalates. And we also want good governance structures in place so that any gains can be sustained and actually self-generating so that these outcomes and these successes will continue into the future. So that is very much a high-level overview of Mercy Corps' work, but you will get much more in depth with Ezra's photos in just a moment. I want to make sure that everybody here knows that there is a Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we are saving part of the end of this presentation for your questions. So while you're looking at Ezra's photos, if you have a question at any time about the woman that you see in the photo or the program that he mentions or how he got the lighting right, you can enter that question with the Q&A function and we'll get to as many questions as we can at the end. And then also this session is closed caption enabled. So if you would like captioning for this presentation, there is something underneath, once again, that bottom row on Zoom, it says CC, and that should activate your closed captions. If you're having any problems with either of these, you could use the chat function and somebody on the Mercy Corps team will be able to help you behind the scenes. And with that, let me introduce Ezra Millstein. He is Mercy Corps' Global Photography Director, but before joining Mercy Corps, he was the staff photographer at Habitat for Humanity International for about a decade. And before that, he worked for International Rescue Committee, World Wildlife Fund, National Geographic Society. He was also a Peace Corps volunteer in Eswatini. This man has a full passport. And he also, in his spare time, makes award-winning documentaries that are shown in film festivals all over the world. And today he lives in Amman, Jordan with his family. But today, he is joining us from New York. And so welcome, Ezra. We're really excited to see your photos, hear your stories. Let me pass it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Lyndi. It's great to be here talking with all of you. Thank you for joining us today. It's been a few years since I've done one of these webinars. Maybe some of you have been at previous ones that I've done, and if so, welcome back. It's always a pleasure to share our photos and stories with you, the supporters who make so much of this work possible. That was a thorough introduction. I don't need to add much to it, but I have worked at Mercy Corps for about 8 years, and And my role is to go out on about 8 to 10 assignments a year, documenting our work around the world. I also manage our asset gathering team, which has 5 regional photographers based in different locations around the world. So today I'm just gonna go through some of my favorite photos from recent trips and the stories behind them. And then I'm really looking forward to answering some questions at the end. And here is just a quick overview of the countries I'll be going through today. This is, I think, a selection that shows a bit of the geographic and programmatic breadth of our work. These are actually my recent trips in chronological order. So we'll be going through some images from Pakistan, Syria, Nigeria, Timor-Leste, Senegal, Mauritania, Ukraine, Kenya, and Colombia, which I just got back from like last week. So yeah, it was very hard to choose which photos. I wanted to show you a lot more, but we have limited time, so unfortunately it'd just be a few from each, but hope you enjoy them. And since I know we have limited time, I'll jump right in. And I'm going to start with Pakistan, which I visited last year. My first time there. And as you can see on this map, there was some really bad flooding the year before in 2002 in the summer that affected Sindh province, which is the highlighted region on this map, as well as Balochistan. And it was when I visited a year later in 2023, there was still standing water from that flooding. It was that severe. And you can see that in this first photo. This is Hanifa standing in front of standing water near her home left over from the floods. So I was there to document the impact of climate change and how Mercy Corps is helping people to recover. Hanifa's family is a good example of this. She's from this small village near Jacobabad in rural Sindh province, and they have about 50 families there, and the flooding destroyed all of their homes, destroyed all of their crops, wheat and rice, excuse me. And for Hanifa, only 2 of their goats and 3 of their sheep survived, and they were forced to sell those in order to survive themselves. The flooding also resulted in a lot of waterborne illnesses, and so her children got sick. They also got malaria. So it's a pretty bad situation. She applied for emergency cash assistance from Mercy Corps and got 50,000 rupees, most of which she spent on a pregnant goat. And so she's able to get milk from the goat. And the goat also gave birth to 4 baby goats, which she is able to sell, will be able to sell to continue to support her family. And baby goats baby goats and kids, always a winning combination in photography. This is a picture of her sons, and you can see the mother goat in the top left and the baby goats the kids are holding. And I feel like this is a theme that every year that I get an opportunity to photograph kids and goats, it ends up being one of the most popular photos of the year, and this was no exception. Moving on to another person who was impacted by this flooding. This is Gulam at his vegetable stand. He also lost basically everything to this flood. He's a father of 9, and he had been a farm worker, a manual farm worker for his entire life. But the floods damaged all the farms nearby, cutting off his access to work. So he was really in trouble. All of his cattle was killed. He had to borrow money just to pay for public bus to evacuate his family from the area. So with no way to support his family, he also applied for emergency cash assistance from Mercy Corps, which he used to open this vegetable stall. And it also provides a way for in the area to get fresh vegetables. This is the last one from Pakistan. I just added this in. This is a young girl named Soon using one of the 70 water pumps that Mercy Corps helped to rehabilitate after the flooding. This is more on the infrastructure side of the work that we did, but it was equally important. And we not only rehabilitated these water pumps, but also helped to drain standing water and repair 16 irrigation canals. Going to go on to the next country, Syria, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It's been in the news recently, last few days for sure. It's a place I've gone back to several times over the years. The first time was in 2017, and you know, one of the interesting things I've noticed in going there repeatedly is that you can see like the currency is devalued every time I go back. The currency is worth less and less and less, and so that's really an encapsulation of the economic crisis that they're facing there. Here's a map. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the geography of Syria. The photos I'll be showing you are from Raqqa primarily, which is sort of in the north central part, and you can see on the map there. And I'll start with Hiba and her son Khalid. This is one of my favorite photos from this trip. It was a great story. Their access to water in this neighborhood has been a major challenge historically, and for years the only way they could get it was, they showed me, they would literally go out to the street and dig a hole in the street and find a municipal water pipe and tap into it, and didn't work very well, and the water was often dirty. So it was a real problem for them. And in July of last year, Mercy Corps completed a new water system for the neighborhood, which actually reaches over 20,000 people. So now Hiba and her family have a tap in their home, which has made a huge difference in their life, that they have safe and dependable water supply. And here's just another photo of them. This is Khaled washing his hands in the courtyard. This is Abdullah, and he's sliding a manakish into the oven in his bakery, where he's been a baker since 2017. The economic crisis that we've talked about has made it really difficult for him to operate this business. Escalating prices have reduced his ability to operate and maintain his equipment, and fuel prices have been skyrocketing, and that's posed a real hurdle. In the past, he had to resort to buying fuel through unofficial channels at a really high cost. So he signed up for a Mercy Corps program, which helped him to buy solar panels. And now all of his equipment, refrigerators, mixers, freezers, they all run on solar power. And this has eliminated his dependence on fuel. And consequently, his income has increased by about 25%. So it's had a huge impact. And honestly, I could have spent the whole day in this place. It smelled amazing. And we did eat lunch there. But here's some more photos from the bakery. It was a really great story, and it was cool hanging out with him. Going to move on to Nigeria, where I visited in this past January. Here's a map again. We have a ton of programming all around Nigeria. It's really diverse, but you can see here the highlighted region is up in the north east corner is called Borno State, and we do a lot of work up there. That's just one of the areas where we work. I'm gonna start in Nigeria with David. He's a cobbler, and you'll see he has a cane. He was injured in a car accident when he was young, so he now uses the cane all the time. In the early 2000s, his community went through several years of intermittent violence over politics, religion, culture. And so as he opened his shop in 2019, he remembered the impact that had had on him. And he decided that he wanted to mentor some of the young men in the area. So he acts as sort of an older brother to them, holding them accountable, making sure they do their schoolwork, and teaching them to cobble shoes so they're able to earn a living later on. And he started participating in Mercy Corps' partner program in 2022, and he served as the leader of that program's people living with disability group. And he told me that participating in that program has given them the tools that they need to build peace in their community. Peace building is really a big theme in our work in Nigeria. And that's illustrated in this next photo as well. These are herders and farmers using a water point. In 2017, tensions developed between the groups in this area. The herders would go across farms in search of water for their animals, and they would often damage or ruin the crops, and farmers would get mad. And after violence broke out, the herding community fled, setting up camp in a desert brush area called Ruga Fulani. And so this past January, Mercy Corps worked with the local community to build this water point, which provides consistent clean water access for both groups, and it helped to diffuse tensions between them and rebuild relationships. And as much as I would have liked to have rented a drone on this trip, this is not a drone shot. This was taken from the top of a rickety water tower, which I gotta admit, our security team hates it when I do this, but I can never resist climbing up on top of a water tower to get an interesting angle. And I'll be honest, I think the older I get, the more worried they get when I start climbing up there. But anyway, this is the view from the top. And yeah, it's sort of a miracle that none of those rungs broke off on the way up, but I think it's worth it for the shot. And one last photo from that. This is the same water point. This is a farmer named Dennis getting water. He walks 90 minutes multiple times a week to get the water because it's closer. It's further, but than the river, but the water is cleaner. And he told me that sharing this water with the herders has really created some great relationships between the communities. Their children now play together, and he regularly has conversations and negotiations with the herders at the water point. So really just a great illustration of how peace building can work. Gonna go on to Timor-Leste, where I hadn't been in about 5 years. It's a really beautiful country. And one of the questions I get asked when I talk about Timor-Leste is, where is Timor-Leste? So you can see it here on this map. It's about half of an island in the lower right-hand corner there, and it's surrounded mostly by Indonesia, and then pretty close actually to Australia in the south. And I'm going to start with this photo that I think you've seen. It was in the invitation. This is Juliana sitting in her classroom. And since last year, her school has been working with a Mercy Corps program called Hatutan, which provides trainings for faculty and students on nutrition, health, and hygiene. So Juliana and her fellow students have learned the importance of eating nutritious food, how to wash their hands regularly and thoroughly to make sure that they stay healthy and avoid illness. The program has also supported the school in providing more varied and nutritional school lunches, which has also increased attendance among the children. So here's another photo. You can see Juliana sort of in the middle of this line of children lining up to wash their hands before eating lunch at school. it's a very cool program. It was fun to spend the day sort of in this sunny courtyard with kids running around and very energetically. There's a lot of photos to take there. And this was a couple of days later. This is sort of shows you again just how green and mountainous and lush Timor-Leste is. Truly a beautiful place. These are some farmers digging terraces on a demonstration plot, and they're mixing grass and tree leaves and manure to make compost so that they can grow vanilla and other crops. And this work is part of Mercy Corps' MRED program, which you may have heard of. It's in several countries where Mercy Corps works, and it basically supports climate-sensitive agriculture design. So in this case, with heavier and increasingly unpredictable rain patterns due to climate change, the area has experienced a significant increase in the number of landslides, as well as a decrease in crop yield, as a lot of plants are experiencing waterlogging and root rot. So this kind of mitigation measure is really crucial moving forward in the face of climate change. When I look at this photo, it reminds me of the fact that the night before, I was walking around my hotel room, and sometimes you're in, like, when you're traveling a lot, you are not that familiar with the layout of your room, and I just slammed my foot into the bedpost of the bed in the hotel room and broke one of my toes. And so that morning, when I look at this photo, what I mostly think of is doing a 1-hour hike up a muddy trail with a broken toe. But yeah, totally worth it. It was a beautiful hike, and I like the photo, and my toe is fine. Yeah, I'm gonna move on to Senegal. This was the next trip I went on in the this was in the past late spring, and this is actually a photo I took with my phone, but it's of a mosque that was built in the late 70s called the Mosque of the Divinity. Really beautiful spot. With Senegal, you'll notice that the programming here mostly focuses on renewable energy for small businesses and farmers. And here's a map of Senegal. The first photos I'll be showing you are, if you look sort of next to the Gambia, which is a country that basically surrounds the Gambia River, follows it. There's a town called Tambacounda, and that is right around where these first images were taken. And we'll start with Muhammadu, and he's at his banana plantation. The farm is run by a partnership of 23 farmers, and bananas are a really crucial source of livelihood in this area. They're consistent, they're a high quality crop that produces year round, but they also require a lot of water to flourish. And as temperatures have been increasing over recent years, the amount of water needed has also been increasing. So this farm in the past used a diesel generator to pump water from the nearby Gambia River. The fuel was expensive, the pump would overheat. It was not the best system. In 2022, Mercy Corps helped them to install a solar-powered water pump, which has saved them about $2,500 a year in fuel costs. So part of that $2,500 has gone directly to the families, improving their lives, and the rest feeds back into the farm for maintenance and production costs. And here's another photo of Muhammadu with some of the other farmers in his collective. Next, I'll talk about Iyatsu here, or Isatu, sorry. She's in Mbor, Senegal, and this is her with her grandson. She makes and sells cereals, fruit juices, jams, and other food products. And again, with rising electricity costs, Usatu has been making less of a profit in recent years. So in 2022, Mercy Corps' Energia program helped her to install solar panels for her business. And to give you a sense of the difference that makes, before these solar panels were installed, the electricity bill was about $250 a month, and it has been reduced to about $100 a month. So it's made a big difference in their quality of life. And has enabled her to dependably power refrigerators and freezers, making sure that her products have a longer shelf life and thus giving her higher profits. I'm gonna go next to Mauritania, which was the next country I visited this year. It's one of the most beautiful and remote places I have ever been. I flew into Nouakchott, the capital, and I'll bring up a map here again. You can see that's on the coast, and the majority of Mercy Corps' work is in the southeast corner of the country, in an area called the Hauts. And so flew into Nouakchott, and then it was a 2-day drive across the Sahara, essentially off-road through the middle of the desert, just to get to where the work was being done. But pretty fascinating place to see. I feel like this photo is emblematic of that. It's a guy named Barke, and he's watering crops at a farming cooperative, which has been in operation since 2008. There are about 50 women that work on the farm. They grow cowpeas, tomatoes, eggplant, and other things. And Mercy Corps has a program in Mauritania called Nafore, and they provided business training, technical training, seeds, and equipment for the cooperative, which is helping to increase productivity. But what I really like about this photo, it's a little bit surreal. I think it captures how this farm just kind of rises out of the empty desert. You can see beyond the line of vegetation, there's basically sand as far as the eye can see. And this is another image of the farm there. This is a man named Baba just getting water from a well on the farm. And this was one of my favorite spots in Mauritania. This was a town called Ten Hamad, which is really in a remote village. It is a remote village in the Sahara, and this is Mohammed baking bread in the oven that he built out of mud with his hands in 2014. He serves 4 villages with about 500 people. Every day he bakes bread every day. It's a staple, and he is the only baker in the area. So he was telling me, and other people were telling me, like when he calls in sick, people just don't have bread, and people are sort of like tracking him down, trying to give him all sorts of medicine or try to help him because it's that important to the community. He bakes 40 to 50 loaves a day, or sometimes more when there's special orders. And it's been tough for him recently as as flour costs have increased. And this is partially due to the war in Ukraine. This is a trickle-down effect of the war in Ukraine. How flour prices have really skyrocketed around the world. So in June of 2023, last year, he participated in a training provided by Mercy Corps where he learned financial management, other business skills, and he also got a grant for $800, which he used to buy a donkey and carriage to haul wood and a motorcycle to deliver bread to neighboring communities and some other supplies for his bakery. And here's another shot of him with some of his bread. This is actually really tasty bread. I should have gotten a recipe now that I think of it. I'll have to go back. I'm gonna do that. Okay. So speaking of Ukraine and flour prices, this has been a really busy fall. It's included trips to Ukraine in September, Kenya in October, and Colombia, which we just recently got back from, but I'll start with Ukraine. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar, again, with geography of Ukraine. It's obviously in the news a lot. And this is, you can see, if you can see Dnipro and Zaporizhia and Poltava sort of along the river that cuts down the middle of the country there. That's where a lot of the work that we do is located. And that's where some of these photos were taken. I'm going to start with Yuri inside a grain warehouse that stores 100 tons of grain. Um, for years, this was a bedrock. He's been a bedrock of the community. 300 community members from multiple villages brought their grain to his factory for processing. But then in February of 2022, when the war started, the area Cherniv came under Russian control, and his home was in an area of severe crossfire. He and his family had to live in their basement until an airstrike hit their home and the second floor collapsed, and eventually they were forced to evacuate. And when they came back months later, everything was gone from the factory. The Russian military had used the land to store their equipment, and the entire factory had been looted with not a single piece of equipment left. So with a Mercy Corps grant, he was able to purchase all the materials he needed to rebuild this fire damaged building and equipment to begin processing grain once again, which is not only huge for his community where, they're all farmers, they all grow grain and they all really need the income from this, but as we've seen, the trickle down effects for places like Mauritania, where this can help to bring down the prices of flour. An interesting note about this photo is that we were interviewing him outside, and it wasn't a particularly interesting scene visually, but then we heard these huge explosions nearby, and so we ran and took shelter in this warehouse, which is where we found all of this grain, and got this photo, which I think really illustrates the story we were trying to tell. And this is Elisa picking cucumbers with her grandfather, Valerie. And this is in Poltava Oblast in Ukraine. Their family used to have over 60 beehives at home, but then in early February 2022, Russian troops began moving towards their town. They had to flee about 500 kilometers and they lost everything. They used their savings to buy a few acres of land to begin farming and beekeeping once again. And thanks to some cash assistance from Mercy Corps, they built this greenhouse that they're standing in. They built it by hand, just in time for the cold weather. And they're now growing cucumbers, onions, and other leafy greens, which they can sell to nearby shops to support their family. And lastly, from Ukraine, I've got this image of, so I was in Mykolaiv and walking down some dark stairs at our partner's office, and the last thing I expected to find, there were air raid sirens. Let me go back. There were some air raid sirens. We were going down into the basement, and the power was out. And the last thing I expected to find was this group of kids with Hannah in the white, in the pink shirt in the center, sort of giving this huge welcoming smile. But she and her mother were there doing an art therapy session during this blackout, and her mother, Yulia, has 3 children, and when the war began, they had to stay in an underground shelter for 5 months. Yulia and her 2 youngest daughters recently began attending these classes, and the children really love it. They feel safe and happy, and it's, for them, they said, a good respite from the fear and the violence of the last couple of years. The girls have made friends with other children in the program, and it helps them feel more connected to their community. And Yulia also attends adult psychological group sessions at the center, which has helped her to process her experience during the war. And there's just another shot of them in the basement during the blackout doing some art therapy. I know we are a little, I want to try to speed it up a little bit because I know we don't have endless time here. We've got 2 countries left. I'm going to go through Kenya a bit, which is these photos are hot off the presses. Literally, you are the first person to see them. Nobody at Mercy Corps has seen them yet. They haven't really been processed, so you are getting a first glimpse here. In Kenya in October, and in Samburu County and Wajir County, which you can see the highlighted area on this map is Wajir County up in the northern corner. It's a very spread out and deserty area, as opposed to Samburu, which is very green, but you'll see that contrast in a second. Going to start in Samburu, where this is Selena, and she's harvesting kale from a community garden that she operates with 20 other women, which is supported by Mercy Corps' No Weary program. The group provides training on a variety of topics, including basic literacy, climate resilient farming, nutrition, and sanitation and hygiene. So as a result of this, Selena has learned to read and write through the literacy training. The malnutrition sessions have helped her to take better care of her children, and the farming initiative has provided her and her family with fresh vegetables that she uses to cook nutritious meals. So, when I look at this photo, it's funny that I think about logistical or security restrictions on these assignments often mean that I end up photographing project participants in the middle of the day, which any photographer will tell you is the worst time to do it. It's got just terrible, harsh light. So I was so excited when I had this opportunity to meet Selena in the late afternoon, and with the late day sun sort of giving this beautiful warm glow to the dark green grid of kale. I really like this photo. It's got these leading lines leading into the background. And here's another photo from that spot where you can see sort of the grid of the kale. And yeah, it's an interesting contrast also with the next photo I'll show you, which is from Wajir County. It's a really cool and unique program here. And the woman in the purple towards the front, her name is Sadia, and she's a pastoralist. She's a mother of 8, and she has 10 goats. She has 10 sheep, 2 cows, and her 11-year-old son is responsible for taking the animals to pasture each day, about 5 kilometers from home. It takes his entire day, and the rest of the children attend school. But this is an area where rainfall has become very unpredictable, making it hard to feed and water her animals. And as you can see, it's very dry. This used to be very productive rangeland, but it's been really badly degraded by overgrazing and collection of firewood. So this past October, she started working with a Mercy Corps project to restore this 5 acres of rangeland, which really had become completely barren. So as you can see, they're digging these crescents, which helps to retain water. There are deep holes for acacia and eucalyptus trees that provide fodder and medicine for animals. And these raised beds hold grass seeds. So any day now, when the rainy season starts, this vegetation will sort of spring to life and the restoration of the land will be underway. So there are 4 sites like this across 2 counties, and I'll show you an aerial shot of them. You can see sort of the scale of it. When these are restored, they'll enable 2,500 community members to feed their animals, grow and collect grass seeds and really have more stable incomes. So this is a really excellent example of climate change mitigation programming. And last country, I'm going to go through a couple of shots from Colombia, which I really just got back from. And again, you're the first person to see these photos. Literally nobody else has seen them. These will be from a couple of spots. If you can see on this map where Medellin is, and Cucuta, about a 5-hour, very uncomfortable drive north of Cucuta on the Venezuela border is where we'll start. And that is, get that slide up. That is with Carmen here. As you can see on the day we visited her, the nearby river had overrun its banks, flooding her home and her fields. And she told us this is becoming more and more common as rainfall patterns become extreme, again, due to climate change. So in April, Mercy Corps began supporting her and some of her neighbors, providing chickens, which she can sell in order to diversify her income stream. And Mercy Corps also provided technical advice and support for the cacao production, and a rainwater collection system, which was a really crucial development because the family had been using water from the local river for washing dishes and showering. And yeah, as you can see, this has become a really regular occurrence that the river overruns its banks and just floods into homes in the area. And this is the last photo today. This is from Medellin, Colombia. And this is Carmen and her younger brother, Juan, and they're sitting in a barber's chair in their family's shop up in the hills. And their family of four lives in the shop. Their mother, Maria, participated in Mercy Corps' Joven Pro program this year. She attended 7 classes on financial management, marketing, and more. And at the end of the course, the couple received 2 million pesos, which they used to purchase a second barber chair, which has helped them to earn and save more money. What I really like about this photo, I like the framing of it. I like that the kids are surrounded by sort of the decorations and equipment of the shop. And to me, it just really captures the feeling of what it was like being there, living and, sharing this small space with a family of 4, all working, living, and studying in this really bustling, confined room. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Lyndi.
Ezra, thank you for taking us through many geographies across the world. We do have quite a few questions to get to, so we'll see how many we can get through. There's a few that are geography specific and then some that are kind of broader. So let's start with the geography specific ones. 2 from Pakistan, actually. The first one was those 4 little boys with the goats that were just so adorable. Are they quadruplets? They looked so similar.
They are not quadruplets. They do look really similar, but they're all different ages. They're close in age. They're all brothers, but they're not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
thanks.
I could see that I get it. They sure.
Yeah, yeah, they were adorable. Also, how reliable is the safety of the well water in Pakistan that you had referenced?
That was really the point of the rehabilitations to a large degree, because the wells had been flooded, and so it had made them so they had all been contaminated. So part of the rehabilitation process is making sure that the water is safe and dependable, and there's regular testing involved in that. And part of the process is empowering the community itself to take over the regular testing and maintenance of the wells. So yeah, once it goes through that process, it is dependably safe for drinking.
Great. And then another question specific to one of the geographies we saw was Mauritania, which I think for a lot of us in our mind is just a blank slate. We just don't
Totally.
hear much out of Mauritania.
Yeah.
And so the question is kind of around specifically what flowers or flour was that man, the baker, using? But then also, what kinds of grains do you see being used across Africa? You referenced that it's coming from Ukraine. Is there anything local that they can supplement with?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think it was just basic wheat flour that he was using in that photo. Um, it is there is a diversity of flour certainly across Africa, and I've seen millet being lots of grains being used. I've seen millet, I've seen wheat, I've seen what else? I mean, corn gets ground into flour. There are a lot. There's a pretty good variety. But really just the global supply system has really been designed around these countries that are massive producers, both of flour and of fertilizer. And so Ukraine is just one of those countries that, historically is this huge. I mean, you drive across the middle of Ukraine, and as empty as the Sahara seems when you drive across Mauritania, Ukraine is just green, like the most productive breadbasket you can ever imagine. So they really, the world has become dependent, but it's definitely, I think it's another important mitigation strategy to prevent shocks, is to enable people to grow their own grains where they live, and that is definitely one of the benefits to supporting these farms. Definitely, yeah.
Well, and one of the last photos that you showed was, I think it was from Kenya, and you had an aerial shot, and it was you had a that one, and closer up we could see that they were building those bioswales, and I think you referenced that they were going to plant fodder for cattle to be able to eat, and the plan is to replenish this land to be able to cultivate it and grow their own food, as a shock absorber in the future, to feed their families. When I look at this photo, it is vast and it is barren. Do you ever get the chance to go back to a community you visited where you see something like this and you think, gosh, there's no way they're going to grow something there? And then you go back years later and you've seen, that there is greenery, that people are growing their own fruits and vegetables. Do you have a story like that you can share about going from what we're looking at right now to something that we just wouldn't be, but our eyes would not expect it, a few years down the road?
I mean, I will say it's a really great question, and I've been to this area in Wajir every few years now, and I'm really looking forward to going back in a couple of years and seeing what this turns into. I haven't seen anything on this scale before, and this is, I think, as I was talking to the team, this is a really complex and interesting program. It's not just restoring the site, but it's also Mercy Corps is partnering with the county to they've built a geospatial research facility where the county can really like map out through satellite data the best places to do this kind of restoration and all of that. So it's a little it's really fascinating to see all the different aspects of this program. And so it's unique in that sense, I think, both in its complexity and its scale. So I can't say I've seen anything like this that I've had the opportunity to go back and see, because I think it's pretty innovative, and I'll be really interested to see what it looks like. I'm thinking back to Syria, where I had mentioned that I've gone a lot of times, and a couple of trips ago, outside of Hasaka, which had been really had a tough time during the war. It was pretty barren, but there were a number of greenhouses that had been built that were seemingly out of nowhere, that were just these really productive. They were growing like something like 5 tons of cucumbers in these greenhouses. So there are definitely those kinds of situations where in places where you would think maybe nothing could possibly recover. You see those instances of incredible, the combination of hard work and technology. It's incredible. It's incredible what you can do. So yeah, it's a great question. I'm really looking forward to going back to this one and seeing what it looks like in the future.
Okay, you have to host another webinar and
Yeah,
show us the before and
exactly.
after.
Exactly.
Okay, no, a few questions are coming in that are a little bit broader and maybe not geographic specific, but they're really interesting. One is around Mercy Corps' philosophy around photographing people. And
Mhm.
so how are you able to get the consent, ensure that the people that are being photographed understand how and where their photos will be used? And it just seems like such a complicated, almost thing to introduce to some of these people that you're photographing, and you want to honor their decision to be photographed or not.
It's a really good question, and it is something that takes up a lot of our effort and our time to make sure that we do that in the right way. We work very closely with Mercy Corps' safeguarding team to develop a consent process that is, thorough and really makes sure um, that that people understand exactly like the question asked, like where are their photos going to be used. We have a multi-page form that we read to them. It's been translated into multiple languages, and we share that form with them. We're always with the translator, so that we can make sure that they thoroughly understand, their photos may be used in emails, on the website, in social media, all of that. We make it very clear that they're under no obligation to have their photo taken. It doesn't affect their participation in the project, and the guidelines are even stricter for photographing children. We need parental consent. The way we show children is very carefully. There's very strong policies about the way we present children. So yeah, it's we have these forms. We go in. The first thing we do is have a conversation with the person. And by the way, we're also always with our staff who are from that country and from that culture. So it's not like if I'm coming into Mauritania and I'm just walking in, I'm not just sort of some strange foreigner who's just approaching them randomly. Like, they know who Mercy Corps is. They often know our staff, who have been working in that community for a long time. And so, they are, we make sure that they know exactly how it's going to be used, and don't pressure them at all. And if anyone ever has even if you feel that they might not be comfortable, you try to just sort of back off. So yeah, it's definitely a very we pay a lot of attention to getting that right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know we're running short on time. And Ezra, if you wouldn't mind, as the questions have moved to more general, would you mind taking down your slides so we can see you a little bit
Oh yeah,
better?
yeah. Sorry.
And maybe we can get into more questions, but one of them is around, again, the subjects that you choose. And we're all headed into the holidays. How do you get your subjects to look natural and so beautiful, maintain that dignity? Maybe you've got some tips for us to get smiling faces on camera as well. What are
Yeah.
your tricks to capturing that so well?
I think the most important thing is to establish a rapport with the person you're photographing before you even get your camera out. Like, I would, I've seen people sort of walk up to someone with a camera and immediately, start pointing it at in their face, and the first thing we do is we go up to them, we explain who we are, we have a conversation, we talk about why we're there. And often, so, the reason I have all these stories is because we also do an interview with them to get their background and more of their story. So, you know, I usually almost always do that first so that we can have a conversation, they can relax a little bit, and they get to know you. I'm fortunate that we have a really great team in all these countries I go to. There's a team from that country who can help me with any cultural things that come up, that sort of thing. But really, I think the biggest tip is to connect with them as a person first before you start talking about taking a photo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's get one more question in. And if we did not get to your question, we can follow up with you afterwards. Thanks for so many great ones coming through. The last one it looks like we can hopefully address is about 2025. What types of changes do you foresee in 2025 amongst your work? You're the one traveling, talking to teams, talking to participants. Do the results of the US election, will there be impact in the communities we serve that you're aware of? Any sort of insight that you could provide around that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in the impact that the election will have. Obviously, U.S. policy does have a huge impact on communities around the world. But it's I think our work is going to continue to be sort of pretty similar. It's I've now been through I worked at Mercy Corps for 8 years. Been different US administrations. There's been a pandemic. There's been a lot of different circumstances that we've gone through during that time. And for me, the work doesn't change that much, a lot of the programming obviously has to adapt to what's going on, but considering the way Mercy Corps strategy is set up, we work on climate change. That's not going away. Conflict isn't going away, unfortunately. So if those things are exacerbated by a new by a new political regime or something, then then we'll just have to adapt. But that's what we do. So I don't think there will be any big changes in what in what I'm expecting to see. But then again, I didn't foresee the pandemic. You never know what's going to happen, but we're always ready for whatever comes.
Right. Well, Ezra, thank you. A picture says 1,000 words. You've just given us a tone to work with because the role that you have at Mercy Corps of bringing the stories of these people to life who otherwise their stories would never be told is so important. So thank you for what you do. And thank you for joining us here today to everybody on this call with great questions or just listening with intent. Thank you for joining us. And as I mentioned at the top of the hour, so many of you generously support our work. We could not do it without you. Thank you. And of course, I'd be remiss to say today is Giving Tuesday. It's one of the most important fundraising days for nonprofits around the world. So if you feel inclined to make a gift after seeing this presentation, please do so on mercycorps.org. Your unrestricted donations make such a difference to the programs that we do around the world. Thank you for joining us, and we will be in touch with the recording and the presentation soon, and maybe even a few of the photos for you to share. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.